Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the ever merciful. Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen. All praise is due to Allah, the Lord, creator and sustainer of all things in existence. Wassalatu wassalamu ala nabiyyihil ameen. May Allah raise the rank of and grant peace to His trustworthy messenger, Nabiyyina Muhammadin, our Prophet Muhammad, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Likewise, all of his family, followers, and companions. Amma ba'd. As for what follows, then we thank Allah, tabarak wa ta'ala, for having gathered us here at Al-Masjid Al-Awwal in the city of Pittsburgh with our beloved brothers in Islam and with our beloved brothers and sisters online and locally here as well and wherever they may be. May Allah ta'ala bless us all and allow us to gather in what pleases Him, and allow our gatherings and our partings to be for His sake. And we ask Him to increase us in knowledge of Him and in closeness to Him, Jalla wa Ala. This evening, the night preceding the fourth day of the month of Muharram, the first month of this year, 1445, we continue our study of the second point. This is part 2 of our study of lesson 2 in our Tahawiyya workbooks. On page number 17, I'll reread that text and then we'll pick up in the explanation where we've left off. You've heard we're reading the Tahawiyya text, which is a text in Creed, Aqidah, or is it Fiqh? Rulings. It's in Aqidah. All right. The author is Ibn Hajar or Abu Ja'far? Abu Ja'far. Abu Ja'far is a Tabari or a Tahawi. I would have failed this last week. So Tahawi or Tabari? A Tahawi, that's where we get the name of the creed, the text from. And his madhab that he followed, was it Hanbali or Hanafi? It was Hanafi. Okay, so we've got Al-Aqidah Al-Tahawiyya by the author Abu Ja'far Al-Tahawi Al-Hanafi, who died in the year 421 or 321? 321, over 1,100 years ago. We're reading the text from over 1,100 years ago, an ancient text from the early Muslim scholars. The explanation we read is by Ibn Abil Iz or Ibn Kathir. Ibn Abil Iz. Al-Hanafi or Al-Shafi'i? Is he Hanafi or Shafi'i? He is Hanafi. So Ibn Abil Iz Al-Hanafi. From the 8th century or the 9th century? From the 8th century. What year did he die? 792. Barakallahu fikum. Okay, we're pretty reviewed up at this point. قال الإمام أبو جعفر الطحاوي رحمه الله تعالى نقول في توحيد الله معتقدين بتوفيق الله. We say about the tawheed, the oneness of Allah, with success granted only by Allah, that we believe the following: Inna Allah wahidun la sharika lahu. That Allah is one and He has no partner. Wala shay'a mithluhu. There is nothing like Him, nothing similar to Him. Wala shay'a yu'jizuhu. There is nothing beyond His capability. And thirdly here, وَلَا إِلَهَ غَيْرُهُ. And there is no one who deserves worship, no object of worship, no God by right, that is worshipped by right, other than Him. وَلَا إِلَهَ غَيْرُهُ. So the first half of this expression here has been studied already, that we say about the tawheed of Allah, believing this following statement with success granted by Allah, that Allah is wahid la sharika lahu. So last week we introduced the 3 categories of tawheed from one angle and the 2 categories of tawheed from another angle. The 3 categories of tawheed were, give me one of those 3. Who's with me? Al-uluhiyya, also called al-ilahiyya, also called tawheed al-ibadah. That's the tawheed of what we do. We worship, and how do we worship, and how do we not ever worship, and where do we direct that worship to, and where not to, and so on. That's our tawheed in worship. But before that comes beliefs, and how we affirm things, accept things, and believe in things. That's the tawheed of al-rububiyyah and al-asma wa sifat. The lordship of Allah, that He alone creates, provides, brings life and death. That's rububiyyah. When we say alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, that's what we mean. The Lord, creator, sustainer, bringer of life and death, the maintainer of the entire universe. That's the meaning of that. Then al-asma wa sifat is the names and attributes. Allah has perfectly unique names and attributes, not resembling that of the creation, perfect and unique, befitting His majesty. We talked about that in detail, breaking tawheed into two categories from another way. The tawheed of what we believe and the tawheed of what we do. We believe in Allah's attributes and His names. We believe in Allah's lordship. Then what do we do? That's the tawheed of action, the tawheed of what's been requested from us. Because many people share with us the belief that Allah is the Lord and creator and sustainer. But they say we only worship these other deities. We have legitimate reasons. We're trying to draw near by way of them to Allah and so on, and we talked about that discussion. The main message of all prophets and messengers was to abandon all things that are worshipped besides Allah and to focus all of our worship to Allah tabarak wa ta'ala alone. So then picking up with the statement, وَلَا شَيْءَ مِثْلُهُ, and there is nothing similar to Him, nothing like Him. The explainer of the text, Al-Imam Ibn Abil Izz, rahimahullah, may Allah have mercy on him, stated, قَوْلُهُ وَلَا شَيْءَ مِثْلُهُ, regarding the statement of Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi, there is nothing similar to Him, nothing like Allah. اتفق أهل السنة على أن الله ليس كمثله شيء. All of the people of the Sunnah have total consensus and agreement that there is nothing similar to Allah. لا في ذاته, not as it relates to His actual presence, His actual being. ولا في صفاته, nor as it relates to His attributes. وَلَا فِي أَفْعَالِهِ, nor as it relates to His actions. So just as Allah Ta'ala is uniquely perfect in His actual presence and being, dissimilar to us and the rest of the creation, then each and every one of His attributes and each and every one of His actions are similarly perfect, in line with His wisdom, perfection and majesty, and dissimilar to that of the created beings. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ, as Allah Ta'ala Himself says in Surah Ash-Shura, the 11th verse. There is nothing similar to Him. رَدٌّ عَلَى الْمُمَثِّلَةِ الْمُشَبِّهَةِ. This is a refutation of those who would claim resemblance. They're called mumathila because they do what's called tamthil. Allahu mithlu kada. They say Allah is like this or like that, and do not say that Allah is like this or like that. Is there any way to complete that sentence correctly? Allah is like... No, there's no way to finish that sentence because laysa kamithlihi shay'un. There is nothing like Him. Whatever comes out of your mouth next is wrong. And Allah Ta'ala is not like that because laysa kamithlihi shay'un. There is nothing similar to Him. That's a response to a refutation of those who would claim any resemblance between the Creator and the creation. وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ, while He is the all-hearing and the all-seeing. That's the next part of that verse, the 11th verse of Surah Ash-Shura, رَدٌّ عَلَى النُّفَاةِ الْمُعَطِّلَةِ. That's a refutation of those who claim He doesn't have attributes, or those descriptions are not befitting Him. You can't say that Allah has the description of hearing and seeing and so on. It's a response to them. The first part of the verse refutes anyone who would presume that Allah is similar to His creation. Then the second part of the verse responds to and refutes anyone that would claim that He has no attributes then. Because why would someone claim that Allah has no attributes, or that such and such attribute in such and such verse is not appropriate for Allah? For example, they say, Rahma, mercy. It's not appropriate to describe Allah with mercy. Why would anyone say that? What's the point? Who knows? They consider Rahma to be a weakness. Because they're thinking of what kind of rahmah? Human rahmah. They're thinking of the mercy that's found in the created beings. When a mother has this mercy in her heart for her son, and then her son comes to the masjid and gets into a fight with another boy, whose side is the mother on? Her mercy is, that's my son. He's not wrong, it's the other boy. And so sometimes this rahmah, the heart leans one way, and it's unfair. And so if someone were to think that idea through, they would say, okay, this is not befitting Allah Azza wa Jal, because Allah has perfect justice. He doesn't have mercy that would overtake him and cause him to be unjust. Right? But the problem is in the very initial understanding of the attribute. How was the attribute understood from the beginning? Tashbih. The mercy is like this mercy that we see between parents and children. It's like the mercy that we see between people. And as it relates to Allah, that would be deficient, and therefore we say that Allah doesn't have any mercy then. The process was initiated by the flaw in the thought process of tashbih, and it led to what's called ta'til. Tashbih is to think Allah is similar to His creation, and then ta'til is to say, well then no, He does not have that attribute, and to reject it outright. فَمَنْ جَعَلَ صِفَاتِ الْخَالِقِ مِثْلَ صِفَاتِ الْمَخْلُوقِ فَهُوَ الْمُشَبِّهُ الْمُبْطِلُ الْمَذْمُومُ. Whoever claims or tries to say that the attributes of the Creator are similar to the attributes of the creation, then he's the mushabbih, he's the person of tashbih, claiming resemblance, mubtil, a person of batil, a person of falsehood, madhmoom, he's also dispraised, humiliated and disgraced. وَمَنْ جَعَلَ صِفَاتِ الْمَخْلُوقِ مِثْلَ صِفَاتِ الْخَالِقِ. And whoever tries to understand or indicate that the attributes of a created being, a person or anyone, that is similar to the attributes of the Creator. What's the difference in the two expressions? The first one, they consider the attribute of the Creator to be similar to the attributes of the creation. The other one is, I consider the attribute of the creation to be similar to the attribute of the Creator. The distinction is clear. In the first instance here, we are understanding Allah with deficiency because we're understanding His attributes to be down on the level of human attributes. The other one is we're raising the status of human beings up to the level of being deified, that they have perfect hearing or perfect vision or perfect knowledge where nothing is missing. Then they have attributes of perfection, and we begin to understand them to be similar to the attributes of Allah, attributes of majesty and perfection. That means we're raising the creation up to the level of the Creator. In each case, we're claiming resemblance between the Creator and the creation. So whoever does that second one, فَهُوَ نَذِيرُ النَّصَارَى فِي كُفْرِهِمْ, then he's similar to the Christians in their disbelief, saying that Isa, the son of Mary, not the son of Allah, is similar to Allah in some of His attributes. Ta'ala Allah wa subhanallah, exalted be Allah from such a claim. They raised the status of a human being, a messenger, up to having attributes similar to that of the Creator of the human beings. And along these lines, our Prophet ﷺ said, لا تطروني كما أطرت النصارى ابن مريم. Don't raise my level, don't raise my status like how the Christians raised the status of the son of Mary. فَإِنَّمَا أَنَا عَبْدٌ فَقُولُوا عَبْدُ اللَّهِ وَرَسُولُهُ. I am but a slave worshipper, a servant. So say about me, the messenger of Allah and His worshipful servant. Don't say about me, the light from Allah. Don't say about me, divine with the divinity of Allah. Don't say about me these exaggerated statements of praise, but rather, I am but a human being that has had revelation given to me. So we're not allowed to raise the status of human beings to be similar to Allah in their attributes, not in any one of their attributes, nor are we allowed to claim any resemblance that Allah would have to His creation. فَإِنَّ مَنْ نَفَى صِفَةً من صفاته التي وصف الله بها نفسه if anyone were to negate any attribute that Allah has described Himself with, كالرضا والغضب, like the attributes of being pleased, or the attribute of anger, والحب والبغض, or the attribute of love or hatred. These are attributes established in the text of the Quran and the Sunnah for Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala. وَنَحْوِ ذَلِكَ, and similar things. وَزَعَمَ أَنَّ ذَلِكَ يَسْتَلْزِمُ التَّشْبِيهَ وَالتَّجْسِيمِ, and someone would do so claiming that affirming those attributes would necessitate that Allah must be similar to a human being or have a human body or things like that. تعالى الله. قيل له فأنت تثبت له الإرادة والكلام والسمع والبصر. It can be said to such a person who says, no, you can't say Allah loves and hates. Those are human emotions. You say to him what? Then you actually allow yourself to believe in Allah having a will and speech, as well as seeing and hearing. In general, today's Ash'aris, the Maturidiyas as well, those who are Mu'awwila, they explain away many of the attributes of Allah. They affirm those attributes. They say Allah has a will. Right? So building on that then, مَا أَنَّ مَا تُثْبِتُهُ لَهُ لَيْسَ مِثْلَ صِفَاتَ الْمَخْلُوقِينَ. When you say that Allah has a will and hearing and seeing, you say that's not like the will of the human being. That's not like the seeing and the hearing of the human being. So that same process that you affirm those attributes but you negate the similarities, then فَقُلْ فِي مَا نَفَيْتَهُ وَأَثْبَتَهُ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ مِثْلَ قَوْلِكَ فِي مَا أَثْبَتَهُ إِذْ لَا فَرْقَ بَيْنَهُمَا. Then say the same statement. Just as you said Allah has a will and human beings have a will, but Allah's will is not similar to the will of the human beings. Say that about Allah's rida, His pleasure, about Allah's anger, about Allah's love. Say Allah has love, perfect and complete, befitting His majesty, not like the love of the creation, just like you said that about Allah's will. There's no distinction that can be made between these attributes. When you speak about Allah Ta'ala in this way, making distinctions, we can't say that Allah has love, because love is weakness. Love will make you blind. And you mention all of the deficiencies that come with human love. And that allows them to say love means something else. It doesn't really mean love. It can't be love because we can't describe Allah with love. It's a deficiency. Say simply, you have affirmed for Allah a will. The human will is weak. And the human will has its deficiencies. But you say, no, not like the human will. Different, complete, perfect from every angle. A will that is divine, befitting the majesty of Allah without any imperfections. Okay, say the same statement about Allah's love. Say the same statement about Allah's hatred. Say the same statement about Allah's anger. Say it about His pleasure, and so on. And don't say that those things resemble human attributes and therefore you have to reject them. And that's because why? This is a contradiction in one's claim. And that is a brief, abridged refutation of today's Ash'aris and Maturidiyya, that they claim that you can only affirm a certain set of attributes because those are the attributes that can be affirmed and they're befitting to Allah Ta'ala. But those same ones like hearing and seeing and a will, they can be human and they can be weak as well as attributes. The human will, is it perfect? Don't you will to do things, but then you get weak and laziness overcomes you? Is that the kind of will we are affirming for Allah Ta'ala? Absolutely not. Laysa kamithlihi shay. There's nothing similar to Him. So then, as you have negated the possibility of that will, the will of Allah resembling the weak and flawed will of a human being, likewise, do the same with all of the attributes that have come in the text of the book and the Sunnah. وَلَا شَيْءَ يُعْجِزُهُ. Moving on to the negation of incapability as an attribute that could be used to describe Allah, to be incapable. Of course, you know incapability is deficiency. If you said so-and-so is incapable of doing something, he cannot do something, he's not capable, he's not smart enough, he's not powerful enough, he doesn't have the tools or the ability to do such and such, then that is a limit. That is a weakness, not befitting that such a description would be applied to Allah Azza wa Jal. وَلَا شَيْءَ يُعْجِزُهُ لِكَمَالِ قُدْرَتِهِ. Al-Imam Ibn Abdul Aziz says that's due to the completeness and the perfection of His capabilities. قال تعالى, Allah the Most High has said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. Allah is indeed above all things with power and capability. That's from Surah Al-Baqarah, verse number 20, which resembles many verses in the Quran. Allah Ta'ala also says, وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ مُقْتَدِرًا. And Allah is and has always been over all matters, fully capable, muqtadir. So He's described as qadir, the possessor of qudra, the possessor of capability. He's described as muqtadir, that He is the possessor of capabilities from another linguistic angle. That verse is from Surah Al-Kahf, the 45th verse. He's also described with this negation, وَمَا كَانَ اللَّهُ لِيُعْجِزَهُ مِنْ شَيْءٍ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَلَا فِي الْأَرْضِ. And there is nothing at all, ever, that could be beyond the capability of Allah. Nothing in the heavens and nothing on earth. That's a negation. إِنَّهُ كَانَ عَلِيمًا قَدِيرًا. Verily, Allah is all-knowing and all-capable. That's an affirmation. So in this verse you have a negation of incapability that comes along with an affirmation of capability. That's from Surah Fatir, the 44th verse. Then in Ayatul Kursi, you have وَسِعَ كُرْسِيُّهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. His footstool alone encompasses, surrounds, and is more expansive than the heavens and the earth. وَلَا يَؤُودُهُ حِفْظُهُمَا. And He is not fatigued by His maintenance, His protection and upkeeping of the heavens and the earth. وَهُوَ الْعَلِيُّ الْعَظِيمُ. And He is the lofty one, the great one, from Ayatul Al-Kursi, as you know. In there you have a negation and an affirmation that He is not fatigued by maintaining the control of and the provisions of and all of the affairs of the heavens and the earth. And He is Al-Ali, Al-Azim, the lofty one, the one of greatness. La ya'uduhu. The meaning of La ya'uduhu is La yakrithuhu wa la yuthqiluhu wa la yu'jizuhu. That He is not overburdened by, nor is something too heavy for Him, nor is something outside of His capabilities within the heavens or the earth. فَهَذَا النَّفْيُ لِثُبُوتِ كَمَالِ ضِدِّهِ. This is a negation that is made for the sake of, or for establishing the completeness of its opposite. Meaning, when you negate something, you're not in that negation actually accomplishing anything. Right? If I want to tell you who Simbalt is, and I say he's not Japanese, so who is he then? I just know that he's not Japanese. I still don't know where he's from, what his name is, anything about him. If I negated something else, he's not 7 feet tall. Okay, I can negate things all day, but that doesn't give me information about who he actually is. Get the idea? So negations alone are not used as descriptions of Allah unless there's a benefit intended in them, and that is the affirmation of the opposite of that negated thing. Think about it here as there's a negation of al-ajiz. There's a negation of incapability in these verses. Allah Ta'ala is not incapable of anything in the heavens nor on earth. So if He's not incapable, then what is He? He is fully capable. And that comes in the end of the verse. Think about that as it unfolds here. وَكَذَلِكَ كُلُّ نَفْيٍ يَأْتِي فِي صِفَاتِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى فِي الْكِتَابِ وَالسُّنَّةِ إِنَّمَا هُوَ لِثُبُوتِ كَمَالِ ضِدِّهِ. Every attribute of negation, every time you hear that Allah does not do this or is not described with this description, then it is for the purpose of affirming the complete and perfect opposite of that. كَقَوْلِهِ تَعَالَى, like the statement of Allah the Most High, وَلَا يَظْلِمُ رَبُّكَ أَحَدًا. And your Lord does not oppress anyone ever. From Surah Al-Kahf, the 49th verse. So what does that affirm then? If He doesn't ever oppress, then justice. Perfect, complete justice. لِكَمَالِ عَدْلِهِ, due to the perfection and completeness of His justice. لا يعزب عنه مثقال ذرة في السماوات ولا في الأرض. Not the tiniest little matter of anything in the heavens or on earth is ever missed by Him. Nothing escapes His knowledge. Then if that's the negation, what is affirmed here? Complete, comprehensive knowledge. لِكَمَالِ عِلْمِهِ. This is said to affirm the completeness of His knowledge. That's from Surah Saba, the 3rd verse. وَقَوْلُهُ تَعَالَى, and the statement of Allah the Most High, وَمَا مَسَّنَا مِن لُغُوبٍ, after mentioning the creation of the heavens and the earth, and no fatigue reached us, in Surah Qaf, the 38th verse. So if there was no fatigue, then what does that mean? What do we affirm? The opposite. Strength, capability, complete and perfect. لِكَمَالِ قُدْرَتِهِ, that expresses the perfection of His capabilities. لَا تَأْخُذُهُ سِنَةٌ وَلَا نَوْمٌ. No slumber or any sleep ever overtakes Him. No slumber and no sleep ever overtakes Him. From Surah Al-Baqarah, you know, in Ayatul Kursi. So if we're negating that, then what are we affirming? Absolute awareness, absolute knowledge of what's going on in the creation. The one who sleeps for some time, then he misses things. He's not aware. He's not upholding everything all of the time. There are lapses and incomplete descriptions that he would have. So those are negated to affirm the completeness of His maintenance, protection, upholding, and awareness of the entire creation all of the time without lapse or deficiency. لِكَمَالِ حَيَاتِهِ وَقَيُّومِيَتِهِ. This affirms the perfection of His actual life and His qayyumiyya, that He is self-sufficient and all of the creation relies upon Him, depends upon Him for sustenance and everything that they need. لَا تُدْرِكُهُ الْأَبْصَارِ, that no eyesight reaches Him. Allah Ta'ala in this life is not seen by eyesight. That's a negation. Allah is not to be seen by human eyesight. Then what does that affirm? That's a bit more figurative and less direct, this one, huh? What does it affirm? Al-ulu, that He's lofty. That's nice, lofty. And as well that He's in grandeur and majesty. The majestic, perfectly majestic Lord and Creator is not seen by human eyes. From majesty, He says, لِكَمَالِ جَلَالِهِ وَعَظَمَتِهِ وَكِبْرِيَائِهِ, and that is due to the perfection of His majesty, of His greatness, and of His just pride. وَإِلَّا فَالنَّفْيُ الصِّرْفُ لَا مَدْحَ فِيهِ. Otherwise, these negations, if they were just negations without any implied meanings, then that would not give us any meanings, nor would it give us any praises of Allah. To say simply that Allah is not this, and Allah is not that, those by themselves are not praises unless there is something intended in those praises. So you have a principle now. Every negation, every time you read in the Quran or in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ that Allah is not something, this action He does not do, He does not have a son, He does not oppress anyone, that is for the sake of affirming the perfect and complete opposite of that deficient attribute. وَالْمَقْصُودُ أَنَّ غَالِبَ أَقَائِدِهِمْ السُّلُوبِ. The point here is the people of deviation and philosophy, the vast majority of all the things they actually believe are negations. They continue in great detail to go on saying Allah is not this and not that. He's not above, He's not below, He's not to the right, He's not to the left. And they keep negating and negating and negating, and they rarely affirm anything. And some of them actually don't affirm anything. Each and every time, what's the goal behind the negation? Tanzih, it's to declare Allah's perfection and majesty. He's not this, He's not that. He means to declare Allah dissimilar to anything and everything. Yet when you negate all attributes and you end up with nothing, not a single attribute or action, then what do you have as the result? Adam, nothingness. Then you have declared Allah to be similar to the worst type of description. You have run away from tashbih, you have run away from tamthil, thinking to be away from every attribute which could resemble the creation, and you landed in no attributes does He have at all, therefore resembling nothingness. And you have landed in tashbih because of this deviation. You have ended up saying that Allah is similar to nothingness. Laysa bikada wa laysa bikada. They say Allah is not this and Allah is not that. Wa amma al-ithbatu fahuwa qalil. And they rarely ever affirm anything for Allah as an attribute. Wa laysa qawlu al-shaykh rahimahullah ta'ala. And the statement of the Shaykh, meaning Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi here, may Allah the Most High have mercy on him, when he said, وَلَا شَيْءَ يُعْجِزُهُ مِنَ النَّفْيِ الْمَذْمُومِ. When he said Allah is not incapable of any matter, that's a negation. That's not that negation which is dispraised. The people of philosophy and rhetoric saying Allah is not this or not that. If you actually revisit the passage, it's important to say this, because look, لَا شَرِيكَ لَهُ, there's no partner for Allah, negation. وَلَا شَيْءَ مِثْلُهُ, nothing resembles him, another negation. وَلَا شَيْءَ يُعْجِزُهُ, nothing is beyond his capability. وَلَا إِلَهَ غَيْرُهُ, lots of negations. No object of worship exists. No object of worship in right exists other than him. Lots of negations back to back, and he wants to make sure that we're clear that the Shaykh is not similar to the philosophers who, when they speak about Allah, all they say is Allah is not this and He's not that. So he says, this is not from the dispraised way of making negations about Allah Ta'ala. فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى قَالَ, because it is Allah the Most High who has said, وَمَا كَانَ اللَّهُ لِيُعْجِزَهُ مِنْ شَيْءٍ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَلَا فِي الْأَرْضِ. And it is not ever that anything could outdo Allah or be beyond His capability. Anything in the heavens, nor anything on earth. إِنَّهُ كَانَ عَلِيمًا قَدِيرًا. He is indeed all-knowing and all-capable. He is Alim, all-knowing, and Qadir, all-capable. That's the 44th verse of Surah Fatir. فَنَبَّهَ سُبْحَانَهُ وَتَعَالَى فِي آخِرِ الْآيَةِ عَلَى دَلِيلِ انْتِفَاءِ الْعَجْزِ. So the Exalted and Most High has alerted us here in the end of the verse to that which is the proven point when negating incapability. When you say Allah is not incapable, then the intention is to affirm that He is fully capable, without flaw, without deficiency. وَهُوَ كَمَالُ الْعِلْمِ وَالْقُدْرَةِ. And that attribute intended is the perfection of knowledge and capability. فَإِنَّ الْعَجْزَ إِنَّمَا يَنْشَأُ إِمَّا مِنَ الضَّعْفِ عَنِ الْقِيَامِ بِمَا يُرِيدُهُ الْفَاعِلُ. Because incapability either results from a weakness in the abilities of the person to do what he wishes to do, وَإِمَّا مِنْ عَدَمِ عِلْمِهِ بِهِ, or it's based on a lack of knowledge to be able to do that thing. وَاللَّهُ تَعَالَى لَا يَعْزُبُ عَنْهُ مِثْقَالُ ذَرَّةٍ. And as for Allah, the Most High, then nothing misses Him. Nothing is beyond His knowledge. Nothing of the tiniest amount. وَهُوَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. And He is above all things with power and capability. وَقَدْ عُلِمَ بِبَدَائِهِ الْعُقُولِ وَالْفِطَرِ كَمَالُ قُدْرَتِهِ وَعِلْمِهِ. Then it is known by way of the initial reaction, without much research, the first opinion you get when you consider the creation, when you have a clean, untainted intellect and fitrah and innate nature, is kamalu qudratihi wa ilmihi, the perfection of His capabilities and His knowledge. Any untainted soul, the creator of all of this, look at the rivers, look at the sky, look at the ecosystems, look at everything in this balance. Describe the creator of all of this to me. Knowledgeable, powerful, wise, strong. These are just badahiyat. These are initial observations that anyone can make without any revelation, without any specific scripture or knowledge or information given to them by anyone else. The untainted soul will simply observe this creation and say, the creator of all of this is Qadirun Alimun, all capable and all knowledgeable. فانتفى العجز لما بينه وبين القدرة من التضاد. And therefore there's no possibility of Allah being described with incapability due to the stark contrast between capability and incapability, between ajz and qudra, between the lack of ability and ability. They cannot coexist. Someone is either qadir or ajiz. He's either capable or incapable because they are opposites. وَلِأَنَّ الْعَاجِزَ لَا يَصْلُحُ أَنْ يَكُونَ إِلَهًا. And also, the ajiz, the one who is described with incapability, he's not befittingly an object of worship. He is not rightfully an object of worship. تَعَالَى اللَّهُ عَنْ ذِكْرِ ذَلِكَ عُلُوًّا كَبِيرًا. And Allah is exalted far above the mention of that kind of thing being deficient and thus unworthy of being worshipped. He is exalted and lofty above such a claim with great loftiness. And our last point in lesson number 2 is the statement of the author, وَلَا إِلَهَ غَيْرُهُ. And there is no one worthy of worship other than Him. وَلَا إِلَهَ غَيْرُهُ. هذه كلمة التوحيد. This is the statement of التوحيد, that Allah is worshipped alone. التي دعت إليها الرسل كلها. That statement which was the main call of all of the messengers. كما تقدم ذكره, as has already preceded, meaning in the first part of this second lesson. وإثبات التوحيد بهذه الكلمة باعتبار النفي والإثبات والمقتضي للحصر. And this statement, the affirmation of Tawheed by way of this word, La ilaha illallah, by way of its negation and affirmation, includes a restriction, a limit, meaning not just Allah deserves worship, which is not restricted. Allah deserves worship, but someone might say, okay, but others might deserve worship as well. But La ilaha illallah, no one deserves worship other than Allah. You see the difference here between that and Allah deserves worship? Both are correct statements, but one is hasar. One limits it. If no one deserves worship, then I can conclude when I see someone directing an act of worship to an object of worship other than Allah, I can say that is illegitimate, that is falsehood, that is inappropriate, that is wrong. Versus Allahu yastahiqul ibadah, Allah deserves worship. If that's my only belief and I see someone worshiping other than Allah, then I don't identify any violation here. So the restriction is needed. La ilaha illallah. No one deserves any worship. There is no ilah, no object of worship by right other than Allah. فإن الإثبات المجرد قد يتطرق إليه الاحتمال. Because just affirming that Allah deserves worship alone could lead a person to make a false assumption, to possibilities that he could think, maybe others deserve worship too. If Allah deserves worship, who am I to say that others don't deserve worship? وَلِهَذَا وَاللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ. And for this reason, and Allah knows best, لَمَّا قَالَ تَعَالَى, when Allah said, and He is the Most High, وَإِلَهُكُمْ إِلَهٌ وَاحِدٌ, and your object of worship is a single object of worship, from Surah Al-Baqarah, the 163rd verse. قَالَ بَعْدَهُ, He said right after that, لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُوَ الرَّحْمَنُ الرَّحِيمُ. No one deserves any worship other than Him, Ar-Rahman, the most gracious, Ar-Rahim, the ever merciful. That's the continuation of that same verse. فَإِنَّهُ قَدْ يَخْطُرُ بِبَالِ أَحَدٍ خَاطِرٌ شَيْطَانِيٌّ. It could come to someone's mind, a thought that would be from the shaitan, from his whisperings. هَبْ أَنَّ إِلَهَنَا وَاحِدٌ. Okay, no problem, we'll give in to this. Our object of worship is one single object of worship. فَلِغَيْرِنَا إِلَهٌ غَيْرُهُ. But other people will have a rightful object of worship other than Him. فَقَالَ تَعَالَى. And thus Allah actually said next, لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُوَ. None have the right to be worshipped other than Him. And that ends our reading of the second point of the Tahawiyya Creed, allowing us to pre-read the third point for our next session, which will not be next week, because next week is our annual summer camp, insha'Allah ta'ala, but it will be the following week. That is point number 3 on page 18. No beginning or end. His will is absolute. قَدِيمٌ بِلَا ابْتِدَاءٍ. He's eternal without any beginning. دَائِمٌ بِلَا انْتِهَاءٍ. Ever present without end. لَا يَفْنَى وَلَا يَبِيدٌ. He shall not ever vanish or cease to exist. وَلَا يَكُونُ إِلَّا مَا يُرِيدُ. Nor does anything happen other than what He wills. That's the focus of our next study, insha'Allah ta'ala. And this is what Allah ta'ala has made easy for us to cover in this part 2 of our study of the second lesson. If there are any corrections to any errors that I've made, or questions or comments that are beneficial for our topic, we'll take them before we establish our Isha prayer. Naam ya Aba Sufyan. Our brother asks about the word kalam in the Arabic language. Kalam in an Aqidah discussion refers to philosophy. Ancient Greek and Roman philosophy from the likes of Aristotle, and in the ranks of the Muslims, the people like Al-Farabi and Ibn Sina, these famous figureheads. And many people think Ibn Sina was like a great Muslim scientist and all of this. He was Ismailiyya, Batiniyya, from the ranks of the philosophers and those who didn't believe in Allah Ta'ala, as exposed by and explained by the great scholars of Islam like Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn al-Qayyim. They're the people who inherited kalam, philosophy, terminology, taqsimat, distinctions and divisions, and when they say everything has to be either this or that, everything has to have a weight, everything has to have volume, everything has to take space, everything has to be understood like this and that, and they base those things on observation within the creation, failing to understand that Allah Ta'ala is beyond those descriptions and those limitations and those taqsimat and those distinctions and those categories that they feel everything has to be placed in. And they've given into foundations to say that everything has to be this or that, and therefore which one is Allah, things that were never spoken of by the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's what's intended by kalam as a certain mustalah used by the scholars of Aqidah. Otherwise, al-kalamu huwa al-lafzu al-murakkab al-mufidu bil-wad'i wa aqsamuhu thalatha. Kalam is the definition of Arabic speech. It's not an ishara, it's spoken words that are put together in constructions. That's the definition of speech in general. And so kalam itself is not blameworthy, because kalam is speech. وَكَلَّمَ اللَّهُ مُوسَى تَكْلِيمًا. And Allah Ta'ala spoke to Musa with real speech, with real kalam. So kalam itself is speech. Then when you use the word kalam to mean rhetoric or philosophy, we say, hada kalam. When we're talking about Allah Ta'ala, recently it's been said here, expressed by someone in this masjid, and it's misguidance, that we cannot describe Allah with the pronoun he, because Allah is beyond gender. And then I said, okay, so you tell me how we describe Allah when he said, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. He didn't say قُلْ هِيَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. He said قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. You will tell me I cannot say he is Allah, the one. I have to not use pronouns now because the disbelievers are playing games with pronouns. And pronoun sensitivity now becomes a psychological disorder amongst the disbelievers. You will now bring that into the house of Allah and say we can't say that Allah is he because that means male gender. So this is kalam here. How do you respond to all of this? Da'al kalam. Stop with this kalam, right? Rather say what Allah said. Qul huwa Allahu ahad. He is Allah, the one. And don't come with these ideas that are borrowed from the disbelievers. Every time we borrow theological terminology from the disbelievers, we go astray. So then is there kalam madmoom? Is there dispraised kalam? And is there praiseworthy kalam? If you mean taqsimat ilmiya, intellectual or academic breakdowns of topics, using words that weren't actually used in the words of revelation but help people understand, and those have always been brought in and incorporated into every science. So the science of, for example, ulum al-Quran, the sciences of the Quran. We have asbab al-nuzul. We have Makki and Madani. We have terms and breakdowns to help you understand the intended meaning of the texts of the Quran. Not to take you away from that, and not to accommodate philosophers, but rather the pure goal of helping you understand this verse and how it was applied. When we say the verse is Makkiyah, that means it was revealed in the early stage of history before they made hijrah. It's a taqsim, kalam aqli, right? You break down the verses into a category of that which was revealed before the migration to Medina and that which was revealed after the migration to Al-Medina. There's a great benefit in doing that. So it's kalamun mamdu, it's helpful, beneficial speech. And it's not borrowed from disbelievers, from philosophers, in efforts to dismantle the religion and harm the aqidah of the Muslims. And Allah Ta'ala knows best. نعم يا أبا الربيع. Question is, where did the Ash'aris get this idea that many of the attributes that come with certain ayat and ahadith are not appropriate in description of Allah, but they must be explained away as something else, while there are some that you can actually apply to Allah as the wordings come in the text, and examples have been given already. Where did this distinction come from? Kalam, rhetoric, essentially. What era? We're talking about after the Mu'tazila and the Jahmiyyah came with their nafi, with their absolute rejection of the attributes of Allah Ta'ala in the 2nd and 3rd centuries. So we've got Ja'ad and Jahm, Ja'ad ibn Dirham and Jahm ibn Safwan. We've got these first Jahmiyyah coming and negating the attributes of Allah, negating the speech of Allah, negating this and that attribute in absolute negations. And the goal was tanzih. We want to declare Allah to be perfect. And you can't say that Allah has speech because that means He must have the devices for speech. Tongue, teeth, voice box, throat. This is their process. Where did they get that assumption from? That if you say Allah has speech, then these things are required. Where did they get it from? Kalam, from thinking of tashbih from the beginning. Philosophy as it relates to Allah Ta'ala. Thinking of Allah Ta'ala with tashbih as a human being first. Allah Ta'ala, He is the one who affirms speech for Himself. And He did not tell us about those things that you believe are required when you affirm speech. So it is faulty foundations and not following the way of the companions who simply said, if Allah described Himself with speech, then we describe Allah with speech and we have nothing to say beyond that. If Allah described Himself with wisdom, then we describe Allah with wisdom. If Allah ascended, He says He ascended, then we say He ascended. And we have no problem with that. Amirruha kama ja'at. Just leave the descriptions as they've come in the text. Don't interfere with opinions. If you can't understand it, leave it for the one who understands it. That's the pure, untainted, you could say here, as the philosophers would say, primitive and ancient, undeveloped belief system of the companions. Because they would compare it to the mature, cultured, advanced, and refined thought process of the later philosophers. And they would speak with these kinds of words until you start listening to those people. Because if the companions were primitive, not advanced, not cultured, not refined, then I'd like to hear from the people who are actually cultured and refined and very advanced in their speech. And this is how the people become attracted to philosophers and leave alone the simplicity of basic Islamic beliefs held by the best of the ummah, the companions of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, affirming everything without any qualms, without any hardships, without any struggle at all. Whatever Allah said, that's what Allah is. I have nothing to say of my own opinions. I have no interference that I can bring. I have no challenge to any of that, no objection. Whatever Allah has described Himself with is a description of perfection that is befitting His majesty, and I believe in it, no qualms, no hardships. It's the later people who've come along. Can you actually say that Allah has anger? You know what anger is. Anger, let's define anger. Anger is the boiling of the blood and the looking for revenge now, and lots of injustice is involved with anger, lots of loss of control. These kinds of things are not befitting to describe Allah with. All you had to do was say the anger that Allah has affirmed for Himself is perfect and complete anger in line with His justice and His wisdom, with no deficiency whatsoever, perfect and befitting His majesty, just like the companions said, without having any speech or objection or anything beyond that. You would have been fine, but you had to go on and analyze things with this great level of intellect and all this refined and mature thought that you think you have. And you ended up, essentially now, a text comes from Allah describing Himself. You say, whoa, we can't accept that. Bottom line is that is not appropriate. أَأَنْتُمْ أَعْلَمُ أَمِ اللَّهِ. Are you more knowledgeable about Allah, or is Allah more knowledgeable about Himself? Subhanallah. And they don't even recognize the foolishness of how far they have gone in such deviation. Wallahu al-musta'an. The simple basic creed is affirm what's come in the text and don't object to any of it. Learn your religion from Allah Ta'ala, who is more knowledgeable than you about Himself. Accept those descriptions and affirm them. And Allah Ta'ala knows best. Naam, akhi. The Christians, they say that God created man in his image. We have a hadith which is actually similar to that, which is from the speech of our Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Is that Allah Ta'ala khalaqa Adama ala suratihi. That Allah Ta'ala created Adam in his image. I have no objection to the text. I have no special explanation of it. And I leave it like that. Without tashbih, without claiming any resemblance between the creation and the creator. And Allah Ta'ala knows best. Our brother asked what's called the lawazim, the implications or the logical conclusions, the necessary logical conclusions that the scholars of Islam mention when they refute the deviants. For example, the Murji'ah, they say that the believers don't have different levels of Iman. They're all on the same level of Iman. So then, the drunkard has the same Iman as Jibreel, the angel who brought the revelation. They don't say that. No one says that with their words, but that's the implication of what they've said. The implications are used to help them explore the reality of the falsehood of their statements. But the implications, the lawazim, these conclusions that we make are not their speech. And we don't ascribe them to them as their speech, but we say, lazimu hada, the result of this line of thinking, or the necessary conclusion that comes from this actual claim is, and then we show them what it leads to. But something has prevented people from understanding their lawazim, the actual necessary conclusions of what they are claiming about Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala. Like as we have come to the understanding this evening that whoever keeps negating the attributes of Allah until there's no attribute that he will affirm, then he has actually affirmed a resemblance between Allah and nothingness. That's a lazim. That's not what they say, but that's lazimu qawlihim. That's the necessary requirement of what they're saying. And the scholars refute falsehood by the lazim, by the conclusions made by falsehood. And the falsehood of the lazim, the falsehood of the conclusion of a statement indicates the falsehood of that original statement. And this is the angle the scholars use when they mention lawazim or necessary conclusions of the statements of the people of innovation. And Allah Ta'ala knows best. This is what Allah Ta'ala has made easy for us this evening. وَصَلِّ اللَّهُمَّ وَسَلِّمْ وَبَارِكْ عَلَى نَبِيِّنَا مُحَمَّدٍ وَعَلَى آلِهِ وَصَحْبِهِ أَجْمَعِينَ.